Welcome back to another episode of the Brew and Ink podcast.
All right, well, welcome back to Brew and Ink.
This is the podcast you get to choose. You guys, our faithful listeners, have the power of choice, but also you get to enjoy the power of our imagination.
Yeah, watching us squirm as we try to write the next episode. Sometimes furiously, right before we start recording.
We should start videoing that part of the process so people can really appreciate how much we sometimes go, hold on, give me a minute.
Hold on.
I'll be right back. I'm stepping into book world.
Yeah, we have to rewrite that. Because we want to bring you the best. That's the goal here. We want to make a good story.
Yes.
And we're trying to be a little more intentional this time and strategic about all that we've learned. Because we really have learned a lot.
Yeah, I definitely feel it in just my process of writing.
Yeah.
But even in the editing and the way that I go about planning to, I can kind of time my writing process a little better. I know, okay, it's going to take me this long to hit these points and to know, like, okay, give me 2 hours, I'll knock this much out for you.
Right, and I think it's one of the advantages of being in a writer's group, right? It's why we restarted basically this writing group years ago now, a few years ago.
Yeah, 2015.
And, we were friends and we met and we started this writing group because I know for me, having someone keeping me accountable, that was really the main thing. But I think starting this podcast has actually kind of exponentially grown our abilities and our skill.
Yeah.
Because we've been interviewing people. We've been talking about it more. We've been forcing kind of some of these conversations to kind of think through and get advice.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really good.
It definitely forces you to think about it on a grander scale when you know you're going to be faced with another story to write, another topic to talk about, and another, someone to find and keep an eye out for to talk to.
Yeah.
Every other week, every week.
Yeah.
If okay, in the next 7 days, I basically have a deadline.
Yeah. I mean, that's helped us network.
Yeah.
It's helped us market ourselves. It's helped us grow as writers, just our skill. And as we talk about, we go to writing conferences too, and we've talked a lot about writing conferences on this podcast and how central they are and important they are.
Yeah.
But I really think kind of an outgrowth of that has been our discussions about what we've learned and just different books that we've written or read about or all that kind of stuff. So that kind of brings us to our topic tonight.
And what is that?
Which is, what are two of the top tips or pieces of advice that you and I have gotten over the last couple of years as we've been diving into the writing gig, trying to do this more seriously? There's a lot of books out there. We've gone to, I know I have, and I know you have too, but we've gone to a lot of conferences and interviewed people and gotten some great information from people.
Right.
So much good information. But what are two of the top? And this is really hard to do for me.
Right. I was going to say, every time you go to a writer's conference, it's a fire hydrant that you're drinking from. And so you try and take as many notes as you can, and then you get back, and your goal is to implement as many of those things as you can and get that just into your either your schedule or you doing it over and over again to where you're like, okay, I've got this now. So it is sort of hard to narrow it down to two from time to time.
I think so too, but just for the purpose of brevity, for the podcast.
Okay.
What's your first one?
So my first one, I learned this back in kind of 2015 when I did NaNoWriMo for the first time. And that was write it all out, don't edit. So the big caveat to this here is that any writer will tell you, especially any writer that has gone through this journey or through this process and figured it out, that when you try and write and then edit what you just wrote, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to want to do a big project. You're going to think about short goals and short writing, and you're going to, if someone says, have you ever thought about doing a novel with that? You may have a conniption or a panic attack because you'll go, I don't have time for something like that.
Yeah.
But when you grasp the concept of writing the story out and just getting it out, even though, yeah, your first 10 pages are probably going to be horrible when you go back and read it.
But that's okay.
But what you've done is you've etched out the main concept, and you etched out who your characters are. Yep. And you're going to, in my situation, I wrote for my main character, essentially, and I was just writing fast because NaNoWriMo, every day, you have 30 days to write 50,000 words, essentially. And I would go, okay, I need a character. I need someone that can interact with my main character, and so make it up on the spot. And then as you go back, or as you progress, you start going, hey, this secondary character is a great main character at this point, and your cast will start growing, but you're not going to get to that point, or you're not going to know, who these characters are if you're constantly going back and editing every few paragraphs and trying to get that perfected. Now, granted, there is something to be said about once you have it all written out, you're probably going to touch up those first 50 pages or first 10 pages 5, 6, 7 times. It's probably going to be the part that you edit more than the rest of the story, because that really is where you're going to have to establish clear goals and set up a hook and make sure that your characters are very clear and your settings are clear and you're not overwhelming your readers with needless information.
Yeah.
So you do go back and edit.
Oh, you have to.
Once you've got the story out there.
Yeah. Just along with that, I forget who said it, but a good book is not written, it's rewritten.
Oh, yeah.
Someone said that. But
Confucius, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
And again, I can't give the source right now, but there's also a quote that says, you can't edit a blank page. So like what you're saying, you have to get it out.
Yeah.
Stephen King says 3 months. He gives himself 3 months to write, and some of his books are huge.
Right.
And he gives himself 3 months to write the first draft. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, it's just getting it out. And
he also says
you just got to get it out.
He'll write the first 50 pages and then start over.
Yeah. Because he says by then you know the goals, you know all that, and you know what direction you want to go in. So
how about for you? Your first one. What's your first one?
My first one is from a book called 21st Century Fiction by Donald Maas. I think Maas. He's an agent. He's one of the biggest literary agencies in America, right? It's a huge agency.
Very cool, yeah.
And he wrote this book called, Writing Fiction for the 21st Century. So, you guys can just Google his name and whatever, something about the 21st century. And I read this book, and it changed everything for me. It's one of the top books I recommend, along with Stephen King's on writing, which is amazing for any kind of writer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a memoir of his experience and his struggles and goals. But this book, and I've never heard anyone else talk about it, but it's in this book where he says, if you want to be successful, you have to write what scares you. In other words, write the thing you think no one will like. Like, write that thing.
Gotcha.
That you think no one will want, no one's doing this. Like, he's like, if you have this passion and you think, man, no one's doing this and no one's writing like this, it changed. It totally turned around how I wrote my first book, The Living Stone. Because I wanted it to have like this redemptive spiritual element to it. And I thought, well, if I give it too much of that, then certain people won't like it. It's going to turn some people off. But I also wanted to give it this like really gritty and violent part and like really dark.
Yeah.
Right? But I thought, well, if I do that, then the people who like maybe the spiritual redemptive element, that'll turn them off.
And then you have no one reading your book.
And then I'm like, right? So, but when he said that, something clicked in my brain, and I went, I'm just going to write the book I want to write. I'm going to write the book I want to read, right? I'm going to write the book that scares me, that makes me think no one will ever love this. No one will ever even like it. It'll never sell.
But you're writing it for other Brit Moonies that are out there.
Right.
Which is also a scary thought.
Right. That's definitely a scary thought. But, so I just went full on to 10 and 11 on both ends. I went as spiritual and redemptive as I wanted to, and made it emotional and meaningful, and then I made it as gritty and as violent and as dark as I wanted to. And people loved it, right? Because my thing was, there are people who really like those sort of movies, very spiritual and redemptive kind of movies, that also watch Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. Like, there are people who do both,
right?
And so I was like, so I just went for it, and that was the one that changed my writing. Gotcha. That doesn't mean I go into extremes in everything I write, but what that means is when I sit down, I'm like, what I want this to be, I'm not going to be scared of what other people want it to be. I just want it, like, what this story needs is this. Yeah. And it's hard because you want to sell your book, right? You want to get published and you want to do all this stuff. But for some projects, when it's your story and it's your idea, you just got to go for whatever that is. Whatever that idea and that vision you have in your brain, you got to go for it.
And going back to Stephen King again and his book on writing, he talks about, he thinks one of the reasons why he's such a successful author is because he was just genuine to himself. He didn't try to write for an audience or write for what he thought was going to be liked. He just wrote what he thought was natural and would be the characters' reactions and responses.
Yeah, there had never been anything like Carrie before.
Right.
There had never been anything like Carrie. He started, we talked about this on one of our podcasts, he started a whole genre. Yeah. Like, there were a lot of authors that came out after Stephen King was popular. Dean Koontz. I read them all. Like, I read a lot of their stuff. And they were good. John Saul, I read his stuff. I mean, there was a lot of these guys that got book deals because all of a sudden all these publishers were like, oh my God.
We need someone else like Stephen King.
Anybody who's writing this style we want to get because this is selling out, the wazoo.
Which we've talked about that before,
We've talked about the wazoo as well. My wife not liking me saying that word anymore when I explained to her what the wazoo is. So that's my number one. Just write what scares you. Write that thing that you think, I am really opening myself up to criticism. I'm opening myself up to being vulnerable. And being vulnerable with your characters. Like what scares you? Like, what would you never want to admit to anyone? Right. Have your characters admit that stuff. Right. It's genuine. It's real. Yeah. People cry. Right. Like, they tell you, like, oh my God, that scene. And you're thinking, I cried too.
There's nothing more reassuring and more satisfying than reading something. And as you're reading it, going like, oh, this is kind of scary reading this part, and then having a group of people all go, wow, that was really good, I really enjoyed that, I like this and I like that. And when they get behind what you thought was, like, too much or scary to share, there's something to that is really satisfying.
It is satisfying. People can relate. People can relate to these deep, dark things. It's universal. Yeah. But it scares us as writers because what if they don't like it? What if we expose the deepest, darkest corners of my heart? What if I do that and no one likes it? And that's the scary part. But what I found is that people generally do. People generally see that. It may not even be the most original idea. Again, one of our topics, but just the fact that you're bearing your character is bearing their soul, and it's you.
It's you,
right? Through the character, people really connect with that. All right, what's your second one?
My number two, and I touched on this briefly in what I was saying in my rant earlier, but keep your characters' goals clear and their involvement active. So it's kind of two things, but for me, I'm finding myself Yeah, I try and catch this as much as I can as I'm writing, but when I go back to edit, so a lot of the times where I'm finding these issues, and that is, yes, you told something from your character's point of view. Maybe you even did so well as to show it rather than just tell it, but was it clearly established, like, where they are going? And it's not just the goals for the book overall. If you're doing a novel overall, it's every scene, every chapter. Oh, yeah. There's got to be goals that are being met and established along the way. And again, it's not just you coming out as the writer and saying it, verbatim, but you got to come up with those ways to integrate it into the story. But your readers got to know, A, what are they looking for in this scene or in this chapter, and B, where is it going overall? What does your character really want? And then in them wanting something, wanting this goal, they've got to be active. They can't just be that character that rides along with the narrative and everything kind of happens for them or around them or to them without them having a say or a reaction of some sort. And we can fall into that because sometimes we are just kind of writing from our viewer point of view. Like we're, as the writer, watching the story unfold, and we forget we got to make that main character that is our point of view character a lot more active.
Yeah. Stories are all about conflict and tension and change. And we want to see a character change from the beginning to the end. Go from one old world to a new world, as maybe Save the Cat would say. And what keeps people reading is tension and conflict. And so you have to, in order for them to understand the tension and conflict and to be in, they have to relate to someone's goals. Yeah. They have to, like you're saying, like, has to be clear and relatable. Like it can be very specific. I want this piece of paper out of that out of that filing cabinet, right? Or I have this minor goal in the scene, but if you know that's one step to saving his daughter, right? Like,
then you're rooting for him to find that piece of paper. You're rooting
for him to find, and if he doesn't, oh my God, what is he going to do? Is it all? So you're right. Like the goals and the conflict and the tension, you have to keep that going, especially now in modern writing, because people can play on their phones. If you bore them at any point, they're out. Right. So you've got to keep that tension moving. It doesn't mean like every scene has to be really intense and whatever. It just means you've got to keep that flow and that purpose in your novel more than any time before.
Yeah. Now. Don't just set up the goal and then have your character get there either. Like, there's got to be, you got to set up the goal and then you got to go, do we have everything we need to get to this point? And then your characters go, oh, by the way, no, we don't. And where are we going to get this? Yeah. And go from there.
I brought the wrong screwdriver for the filing cabinet. Right. What am I going to do now? Yeah. Just like, now you've got MacGyver. That's a MacGyver episode all of a sudden. Yes. I just wrote that. All right, so my number 2. This is, again, these were hard to pick.
Please don't describe your number 2.
We've already done the poop episode, I thought, didn't we?
We did.
No, my number 2, my second one is mentor texts. What that means is books that are like the book that you're writing. Okay. So this is something I don't even remember where I heard it to begin with. I was very specific in my first one and not as specific in the second one. Well, I don't remember where I heard it, but at some point with my first book, The Living Stone, when I was really getting back into writing, it was an idea for a fantasy novel. And I had not read that much fantasy. I had read like the basics. I had read The Lord of the Rings. Everybody's read The Lord of the Rings, and we were all into The Lord of the Rings, and it was that kind of time period. And maybe some Harry Potter, and we were kind of into that. But like I hadn't read a lot of fantasy. So while I was working on the world, and I was world building, and I was doing all that. I mean, I spent 5 years on world building. While I was doing that, I was also reading modern fantasy books.
Which is it's funny because I've heard and I've thought myself, other writers, we can tend to think to ourselves like, I don't want to read what other books are like the book I'm writing because I don't want to read something and go, oh, this has already been done.
Right.
Like I don't now I can't use that idea. When really it was your original idea and it's in your own original world. And okay, maybe it is a little derivative of something else that's been written, but then okay, now you know how to at least make it different.
Make it different. Make it original,
distinct.
make it unique.
Yeah.
Put a twist on it somewhere.
Rather than getting everything done and taking it to someone and they go, "Oh, this is exactly this other book."
Oh my gosh!
And
Agents
you go, "Oh, I've
hate
never
that.
read that." Yeah.
And again, this is about being successful. I mean, yes, it's about writing your passion, about writing what you want to write, but it's also about being successful. And it is really embarrassing when you go to an agent and you say, "I have this great vampire book," and they go, "Oh, well, what is it like?"
Yeah.
It was one of the first questions they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you, what is it like and how is it different?
Yeah.
That's what they're going to ask you. And if you don't know, if you say, oh, I haven't really read any vampire books, you're out. I mean, I'm just telling you, they will be nice to you and they will say, well, it's just not right for us. They'll give whatever little excuse that they give. But no agent is going to take you seriously because they want a writer who understands the market.
Yeah.
Yes,
which is different than understanding story and understanding your genre.
Right. So they want to know, do you know what's selling? Do you know what's out there? Do you know the top 10 books? You may not have read them all, but have you done any research in the genre that you're writing? Because if you haven't, then, and that doesn't mean you have to know it all, but if you haven't done any research,
they've got a lot more work to do on their behalf.
They've got a lot of more work to do, and they want to work with someone who has done that work.
Yeah.
They want because here's what's going to happen. If you write a vampire book, you're going to have to market to people who like vampire books.
Right.
And if you don't read them, then how are you going to relate to people who like vampire books?
Yeah.
Like,
sidebar. Have you seen who's going to be the next Batman?
Right, yes.
Edward from Twilight.
Which I'm not a fan.
No.
But here's the thing. People playing Batman have proven me wrong before.
Yes.
Right?
Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer knows that one. Michael Keaton more than anybody.
Yeah.
And I actually thought
Ben Affleck?
I thought Ben Affleck was going to do a job.
I thought he did a great job.
I already thought he was going to do a good job. I actually think he's a good actor, and I thought he was going to do a good job.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
back to vampires.
But back to vampires. No, so mentor texts, TEXTS. I'm actually doing a video with Kyle Young soon on this because I'm one of the only authors. When he talks about mentor texts, he's like, I have a client, Britt Mooney, and he does great at this. Like if I'm thinking about writing something, I'm going to research the top 10, 15 books in that genre from the last year.
Yeah.
You get it. It's easy. You get it from Goodreads. You get it from Barnes and Noble. Like they have their own list of the top whatever, the ones that win awards, the one that top selling, and you just get them from the library. I just get them from the library, and I get a big stack, and my wife hates it. No, she doesn't hate it. She understands it, but she doesn't like the clutter. But I just have huge, you've seen them at my house.
A stack of 10, 20 books, yeah.
And I don't read them all, but at least we read the first 50 pages of each one.
Yeah.
Because I want to know, how do they start this out? What are they setting up? What's the tone? I want to know. And I'm doing research. How long are these books? Right?
Yeah.
Like, who's the audience? And blah, 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 blah. And I'm just trying to find out, like, what's already being done out there, and is what I'm pitching to my agent. Well, I have an agent now, and because he's going to want to go pitch that to publishers.
Right.
He's not going to want to pitch something to publishers that's already been done. He's going to want something that they want.
Or if it's already been done, he needs to be able to say how it's different.
How it's different, right? And so that's a kind of a big one for me. that's something that works well for me, and I like doing it because I like reading just about anything.
Yeah.
If it's good, and a lot of times you'll find some really great books this way.
Yeah.
Because you'll like, oh, I never even heard of that, and it looks interesting, and you pick it up and you really like it. Sometimes you start reading something, you're like, this sucks, man.
Yeah.
Like, and so you just really end up learning a lot about the market, and you start to think, okay, well then how is mine going to fit into this world?
Yeah.
And it's I think it's a really important tip that people really need to understand as writers.
Yeah.
If you're going to write devotionals, if you're going to write memoir, if you're going to write anything, you need to do some research before you really write it.
Yeah.
And say, what is this? What are these books about?
And when you start talking about that, like researching 20 different books as a comp for every book that you do, I start wishing things like, man, I wish I had a shadow clone technique and a hyperbolic time chamber. And I would just go at it, split myself into 20 people. They each read a book. And when they come back into one, I have all that knowledge in the hyperbolic time chamber. No time has passed. Yes.
Now that could be an interesting story.
Well, it's two different animes that.
Oh, is it an anime that they do that?
Well, Naruto has the shadow clone technique, and then Dragon Ball Z, he's trained in the hyperbolic time chamber. So
but see, no one's put them together.
There you go.
There you go. Now you've got it. Now you've got a new idea.
And that's how you write something that's been done, but it's different.
Exactly. And that's how you would pitch it.
Yeah.
It's like this anime and it's like this anime, but it's kind of a mesh of these two, and this is how it works. And they love that. Give me the same but different.
Yeah.
That's what
Give me what sells, but in a new packaging.
But in a new package. And you can totally do that and make it unique, and you can totally do that and make it your passion. But again, you just got to know what's out there. At least know the rules that you're going to break.
Right.
Let's at least know. Do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Do it and play with it with the audience.
Yeah.
And they'll like it because they see that you get the tropes, or at least you're flipping them on their heads or whatever. They get to see that. So speaking of good writing and getting to good writing.
Yeah.
You're next, man. You have written chapter 3.
Oh, is that my segue there?
That's the segue. We're going into chapter 3.
Yes.
Of Singularity.
Singularity.
Which I think this has been our best season yet.
I'm
not saying that because I haven't enjoyed the other seasons. I have thoroughly enjoyed the other seasons.
Yeah.
And I told a friend of ours, Katie, who has been on the podcast, I told her today, I'm like, you can come back anytime and at least be a guest on. So our old friends who haven't been on the podcast for a while, we miss them. But I really think because we've put a lot more strategy into this season, I have really enjoyed this season. So you're going to have chapter 3, and what's it called?
Chapter 3 is called Tychomatter.
Tychomatter.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm ready, man. Let's hear it.
Let's dive into that. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about writing and how to become a writer, check out our syndication page, seriouswriter.com. They have articles, resources, classes, videos, and a podcast, the Brew and Ink Podcast. Again, check out seriouswriter.com. Thanks for listening. Singularity, Chapter 3, Tychomatter. My choice at that moment was not an easy one. On one hand, I had just received the biggest tongue lashing and demotion of my entire career, and for something I was not even at fault for. It was Jin's fault. She was the one who disobeyed our directive. She was the one cut off and on the run. If I called Admiral Duran right now, maybe I could salvage my reputation and a few ranks from demotion. My fingers hovered over my wristcom screen. But seeing Jin's ship there, gleaming in the setting sunlight, the emerald sea reflecting off her underbelly, I knew the right thing to do would be to help her out. It was eating me up to know what it was that was so important that Jin, the rule-following, straight-laced AI, would risk it all for. And as I realized that I would be going with her, thought about how I'd probably never return to this house, that we would have the whole of the IIF hunting us down, I suddenly considered how bad this looked already. Jin, how exactly did you manage to fly into a military base installation without being detected? And should I be worried about a squadron of IIF drones swarming my house any second? No need to worry, Captain. I have overlaid my GPS and relay signals with that of an everyday personal interplanetary transit vehicle, and I flew in with my optical camo engaged. Us Phoenix drones are so new that all the old systems can't detect us yet. Well, could you at least engage that now so no passerbys get an eyeful of you and blow our cover? Does that mean you are coming with me? Are we teaming up to do this for real? The excitement in her voice was palpable. Yes, Jin, it looks like we're going to go down on this sword together. A rippling wave of electrical pulses washed over Jin and she faded from view, remaining that way while I gathered the rest of my things and my wits. I stared down the gangway as Jin lifted off. Looking back towards my house, a foreboding sense of never returning weighed heavy on me as the drone's platform sealed shut. I sighed with resignation, then headed up into the cockpit. It was bare compared to my piloting bay back at Arnab. A chair and a few simple controls, far less than I'm used to operating with. I secured my harness in place with a reassuring click. Okay, Jin, what's the plan? What's the secret you discovered that got you disconnected? Captain, the IIF has been manufacturing lies about colonization sickness, but I was cut off from the core interstellar neural network before I could verify my discovery. I need hardwire access to the core so we can get proof. All the way to Nexus? Pulse crap, that's far. How much Tychomatter do you have for porting through a Kepler ring? Well, that is our first hurdle. I used all my Tychomatter to get here to you. I'm completely drained. However, I have a shipping log documenting all incoming and exporting shipments. There is a hauler leaving today with the full skid of Tychomatter. And we're going to intercept it, aren't we? I finished her thought. We're gonna attack an interstellar freighter? How do we do that with just me and the minimal weapon systems you're equipped with? Not us, them. Jin displayed a piecemeal ship on her single hollow display in the cockpit. Scrunching my face up, I looked at the ship confused. What am I looking at here, Jin? This, Captain, is the group of pirates that hijacked me during our last mission. I've been tracking them ever since, and they are still nearby. So what, you want to feed them the coordinates and cargo information in hopes that they will take the bait? I think I'd rather deal with freighter security than ruthless pirates sitting on fresh spoils. That's where I need your help, Mitch. We need to get the fuel cells before the pirates know they're on board. Their intel will lack the details of the Tychomatter cells on board. Okay, so it's a stealth mission using the pirates as muscle and a distraction? Get in and out without either side discovering we're a meddling third party. Precisely, Jin said. Jin, if either side catches me, I'll be done for. Sent to work the electron minefields of Capsic 9 for the rest of my life. Or worse. You've got to trust me, Captain. I won't let anything harm you. Mitch, you're my only friend I have. Without you, I'm cut off from everything. All right. Tell me you at least have a spacesuit on board the ship? Affirmative, Captain. Get suited up. Uploading the bait to our pirate friends' database is going to take a minute using the antiquated local direct share network. Being cut off from the core network really has its setbacks. We arrived just outside the projected flight path for the freighter as I finished suiting up. The pirates had taken the bait. The tracking data showed they had adjusted flight paths and were headed towards our location. The closer both ships got to us, the more nervous I became. I haven't done field work in decades. I don't even know if my body can perform like it once could. Steadying my nerves, I tried to push aside those thoughts as best I could, but I could feel the panic waiting to strike. I entered the maintenance service bay where I could access an exterior hatch. A small viewport in the door showed that far in the distance the freight ship was approaching, en route and on time. Now to wait for all the action to begin. I began to tense up, worrying we were going to miss our window. Jin, where's that pirate ship? Is it still en route? Right on cue, 2 photon blasts silently cut through the vacuum of space and struck the larger approaching freighter. Though smaller in size to the freighter, the pirate ship overshadowed our tiny vessel, dwarfing it in comparison. Keeping in the shadow of the pirate ship, Jin moved us in closer to the crippled freighter. I began the decompression cycle and prepared to open the hatch. I was going to have to make a space jump from our ship to the freighter at a distance further than any space jump I drilled in basic training. My right foot planted on the lip of the hatch, I steadied myself with a hand on each side and took 2 deep breaths. Then I launched myself out into dead space. I succumbed to the loss of control, surrendering to the inevitability of open space. There was no turning or reorienting now. I would land wherever my momentum took me. I landed on target, but with more velocity than I had anticipated. The movement of the ship beneath me spun me around head over heels. Before I drifted too far away from the ship, I activated the mag locks on my spacesuit. Both of my boots snapped into place on the outer hull of the ship. I was on. Now to get in. A few paces away was an open exterior loading bay. That was my way in. Jin and I had planned to keep radio silence unless things went bad, so I was on my own. Personnel working in the cargo bay were all frantically running this way and that, strapping things down into place and securing loose items in preparation of another attack. The ship violently lurched and rocked as something struck again, dislodging items and sending pallets skidding across the floor. As luck would have it, one of the pallets got knocked ajar, its contents spilling out, revealing neatly packaged Tychomatter fuel cells. Wasting no time, I leaped forward and grabbed a bundle of fuel cells. 3 workers came over to secure the exposed fuel cells, each with a large red warning sticker proclaiming, "Explosive." One of the men looked at me in disbelief as I took off in the opposite direction, Tychomatter cells in hand. "Hey, stop!" Then to his co-workers, "He's taken a bundle of fuel cells. Stop him!" 2 men took off after me, closing the lead I had in just a few steps. Years of being out of the field and confined to a chair had taken its toll on my body. The first one lunged at me. I sidestepped his outstretched arms, but he managed to get a hand on my foot, tripping me up enough for the second pursuer to tackle me. Hard. I felt my jaw shudder as my whole body crumbled under his weight. Taking the fuel cells in my outstretched hand, I bashed him in the head with the wrapped bundle. The clear cellophane wrapping came loose and a couple of fuel cells fell out. The second man grabbed me from behind and began squeezing my chest, compressing my ribs and lungs. I stomped on the bridge of his foot, then squatted down, pushing against his hips, putting his center of gravity off balance. His grip was still tight, but as I leaned forward, I twisted, flipping him over my hip. He landed with a thud, knocking the wind out of him. I clocked him under his chin with the Tychomatter cells before he could recover, scattering more cells out across the cargo bay. I still had 3 left in the compromised wrapping. "Jin, I'm gonna need a quick exit here in a second. You'll know when and where." I took one of the 3 cells and hurled it across the hangar at an exterior wall. When it hit, it flared up and erupted with a force that sent me flat on my butt. The vacuum of space tugged back everything that had just been pushed away in the explosion. My body was dragged across the floor as I hugged the remaining 2 fuel cells in my possession. I was ejected out of the hole and into space again. Jin swooped in, intercepting me before I was in real trouble. I landed hard on the platform of the open gangway. Catching my breath, I held up the 2 fuel cells and declared, "I got him! Whew! Let's go!" With the other 2 ships still engaged in their conflict, it seemed our plan worked. no one paid attention to the single-manned drone fighter fleeing the scene. Soon, we could see the Kepler ring on the horizon of Arnab's moon. Captain, I'm picking up signals of multiple IIF drones headed this way from Arnab base. Pulse crap. They must have heard our comms when I radioed you from the freighter. Jin, we need to make this fast. I agree, Captain. The IIF has a record of cleaning up their loose ends. That's when I remembered. Zuthras. Those IIF bastards were still sending someone to wipe out all those people. Jin, those people on Zuthras, the Admiral said they were still going to send a replacement drone to wipe them out. I think there's still time for us to save them. We can use the rings to get back to Zuthras in time to possibly save all those people. But Captain, we only have 2 fuel cells, one to go to a destination and one to get back. If we go to Zuthras first, then when we use the second to go to Nexus, we'll be stranded in that system until we can find more Tychomatter. I know, but if there's a chance to save all their lives, shouldn't we take it? I almost wiped out all those people on that planet believing their lies. If I can prevent someone else from making the same mistake, then I need to try. We need to try. What do you want to do, Captain? We need to make a decision, now. All right, and that's the end of that chapter.
That was a great chapter, man.
Yeah?
I really enjoyed it. I really liked what you did with him trying to get those fuel cells.
Yeah.
And kind of how, you know how I like to blow stuff up.
Right, yeah. We got an explosion in there.
Yeah, so he blew some stuff up. So I really like that, man. I think that was great.
Thank you.
And
It was definitely hard. If you guys don't know or don't remember, we are giving ourselves word count limits here. So we only have so much content that we can work with. And there was a lot of different steps along this path in this chapter 3. So I was really having to define how I was going to hit each part without blowing my whole word count load. And that was a lot of the time spent right before this podcast was recording was reducing 200, 300 words over that were over count. But it was tough to get them into that situation and then resolve that situation without making that almost a whole nother chapter there.
Yeah. The hard part is getting to a point of decision, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
As we were talking about this episode and writing this season, the hard part is doing a good job with the story and moving the story along and getting into a good decision point. Because
there's a difference when you're writing just for a regular story. There's a lot of places where you go, oh, that's a perfect place to end that scene, and then I can start into the action in the next chapter.
Yeah.
But for us, giving you guys options, we really have to go, okay, that would be a great stopping point, but there's no decision to be made here at this point. So I've got to write a little more. I got to get them to this main decision point.
Yeah. No, I think you did a good job, and like I said, it's been a little bit more difficult because you've been more strategic, but I think it's turning into a really great story, which means the audience has choices now.
That's right.
And what are the 2 choices again? Let's give them
the
choices.
You guys, our faithful listeners, get to choose. Do Jin and Captain Bruce, do they use these fuel cells and the Kepler ring to go and try and rescue the inhabitants of Zuthras, possibly stranding them when they have to then go off into the core? Or do they just go directly to Nexus and play it safe so that they can have an escape route? Once they patch in and do what they need to do, they may need to make a quick exit.
Right.
So, do they try and do the right thing and they've got this information that no one else has?
But that colony could be destroyed already.
Right.
They could be too late.
The risk is they could be too late.
Too late and get stranded when they finally do go.
Yeah.
Or at least try to have to maybe at some point get more of the Tychomatter, which obviously isn't that easy. So, yeah. Or do they just go straight there? Or do they, So, risks, choices. I love it. So, you guys need to go to our Facebook page.
Yes.
And vote on the Facebook page.
Correct.
We're still kind of redoing some of our website. So, that's not updated quite yet, I think. But we're also going to have some extra episodes, some alternate choices, kind of written out for people at a future date. So if you'd like some of that, we're going to have some opportunities for you guys to get involved and get some extra content. So we're really trying to make this a great experience for everyone, and it's already been a great experience for us. So share.
Yes, definitely share. Share it with your friends, your family.
Share it with your friends. Tell people about it. I know we were talking with somebody last night, and they're like, I tell everybody about it because it's so fun. And they try to get people to listen and vote, and they try to get people involved. And subscribe. Subscribe so that way it's going to pop up on your phone. It's going to let you know on your phone when we post one. And then you can binge listen earlier seasons or whatever you want to do. So
get out there and vote. Yeah.
It's going to be it. But until then,
as always, raise a glass to inspiration and stay inspired, guys.
Thought about before being really uncomfortable with some of the interviews and going, I'm not wearing pants right now because they only see,
Right.
But that might be
satisfying.